Dhirendra Kumar, CEO at Value Research. Dhirendra, hi morning. It's that time of the year when all of us are scrambling to save that extra penny. What advice would you give to our viewers who are watching and who are looking at saving and planning their taxes for the fiscal ahead?
Yes, all kind of tax saving alternatives are available, and in fact, ATC is very crowded. For most people earning, it gets stacked or filled with your mandatory deduction, which is the Provident Fund or EPF, or the voluntary, PPF contribution, where people have such, belief and legacy. Besides that, you have all kind of expenses which are, possible deductions, tuition fee for your children. So if you are still left with any window to invest, which will save you taxes, one must. And I think, there are, looking at the investment alternatives for tax saving, leaving aside the expenses, which is deductible expense, I would say all other alternatives are either fixed income or hybrid, and they come with their own tricks, or in terms of, nothing is all equity. And I would say that, if somebody is, barely able to save just for saving, just to save taxes, save and invest just to save taxes, I think this could well turn out to be the most high performance, most rewarding alternative, simply because this is an only all equity option if nothing else is. And so I would say that we have the general tendency to wait for the last minute. Ideally, one should be in a making these investments in a very planned manner. One should be doing a SIP from April through the whole financial year, so that you don't have to worry, or you are not being threatened by your accountant that there will be a huge deduction, salary deduction, if you don't give the proof of those investments. But we still do that. And it's worthwhile, because, and this could, it may not be a bad idea. I also look at these ELSS. I have done it myself. Doing your annual SIP, tax saving investment, even in March, and if you are doing it for 10, 15, 20 years, that is also an SIP. The long-term nature of such investment, and it can well turn out to be a huge, retirement corpus if this is the only investment that you make.
So, Dhirendra, of course, apart from the first criteria that you spoke of, that one needs to do this well in advance and not scramble at the last minute, equity is fairly risky.
Yeah.
It can be volatile in the short term. Of course, it has, the potential to offer superior returns over the long haul. So give us a sense as to what criteria investors should keep in mind while putting money into an ELSS.
All my equity investment evaluation primarily is driven by, what is the thinking behind the returns being generated. And with that in mind, keeping that in mind, I would like most funds to be very well diversified, a very well articulated strategy, and all that should have translated into at least 3-4 years of superior risk adjusted performance, and also reasonable absolute performance. I really don't care about short term significant underperformance, because superior risk adjusted performance, superior long term returns, and you have to really withstand the some substantial poor performance in a brief period of time. In ELSS, it is all the more important, because once you invest in ELSS, you get stuck for 3 years. You can't even do. So there is a natural enforcement of, if there is any other open-end fund where you will panic and you will take your money out. In ELSS, you can't, and that turns out to be fairly rewarding, because once investors are forced to get stuck for 3 years, it normally ends up being well. In fact, the worst performing period of ELSS funds have also been that also, that 3-year worst 3-year return in ELSS funds have also been superior than the public provident fund return. So there lies the proof. Don't panic and don't look at short term performance. Anyway, one should be looking at it for much more than 3 years, which is the mandatory lock-in period.
Okay, so Dhirendra, let's nail it down then. My colleague Jayesh gave us some insight as to which have been the best performing ELSS funds and the worst performing on a long-term basis over the last 3 years. You've got your list as well of top ELSS funds. Can you just walk us through your picks?
Yes. I like quite a few funds, and if I have to really list 4 of them which have these funds have been able to deliver the best risk adjusted return, they are Aditya Birla Sun Life Tax Relief 96, Mirai Asset Tax Saver, Motilal Oswal Long Term Equity, and Axis Long Term Equity. Mirai Asset and Motilal Oswal Long Term Equity Fund, they are relatively new. They are not even 5-year-old. But what is likable about them is, of course, during this period, they have been able to deliver superior risk-adjusted returns. They go down. They, of course, Mirai Asset is very high-quality portfolio. It is, the core of the portfolio is anchored. 70% is in large caps. It keeps away from the very racy part of the market and has done exceedingly well. Motilal Oswal is a focused portfolio. It has, it has a large cap portfolio of late, but that is not the charter. And I think, if somebody is looking at, if one is making just one tax saving investment and thinking of being rich over the next 20 years, 15 years, this is the kind of strategy which might work out. It can also be extremely disappointing in the near term, but it doesn't matter because, as I said earlier, when you invest in a tax saving fund, you get stuck for 3 years anyway. Axis Long Term Equity Fund, another with a longer history. It's entirely into large cap. It's a very resilient portfolio. For conservative investor, it has turned out to be a very well rewarding fund. And when, of late you would have heard, we have talked about in these programs as well, that large cap funds have lost their plot. They are unable to beat their benchmark. This is a fund which has been able to beat the benchmark even in the recent times with a greater diversification, while the benchmark was able to derive all its return from a very narrow base. 3-4 stocks doing exceedingly well in 2018 and everybody struggled. This fund did not. So long term ability to beat benchmark for with its large cap portfolio, with a very steady portfolio, is the charm of this. And Aditya Birla Sun Life Tax Relief, this is a fund which has its ups and downs and eventually turns out to be substantially rewarding. So if you are looking for 5-7 years, can afford to ignore when it is not doing well, it is well worth it. It rewards for all the interim underperformance.
Okay, thanks so much for joining us this morning, Dhirendra. Great chatting with you on some of these, important plans, given that it is also just about financial year closing.